What's the creepiest thing that ever happened to you? Story 1. I was just browsing this thread when I remembered the most creepy thing ever, with photographic proof. I was catching the last train back from London and had about an hour to kill at a station where I needed to change. It was late at night, I was on my own, and the station didn't have many people in it. I decided that this was a great time to have a little wander around the platforms, stretch my legs a tad, and enjoy the wait. I ended up walking down a platform with no more scheduled journeys for the night, so naturally there were very few of us there. Actually, there were just two of us, me and a little girl. It's quite unusual to see a little girl standing on her own in the dead of night, and I'm not sure if I did the right thing or not, but I stopped walking, parked myself on a bench about 20 meters away, and decided to subtly keep an eye on her to make sure she was okay. At first I assumed her mother had probably gone to the toilet or something, and asked her to stand in the same place until her return. But children shouldn't be on their own like that, so I sat there and decided to be a temporary guardian for her. This girl was standing down the platform and appeared to be about 10 years old or so, in her school uniform. From what I could tell, she was Asian, and seemed pretty confident standing where she was, very, very still. Because after 5 minutes passed, this little girl was still standing in exactly the same position that she was before. I hadn't seen her move an inch. I sat there on the bench thinking about what could have happened. Had her mother told her to stand there and then abandoned her? Had she been separated from her carer? Maybe I should wait a bit longer. And she just stood there, in the same position, right arm clutched to her body, staring directly at me. 10 minutes passed, 15. It was winter and the platforms were cold. This little girl must have been absolutely freezing. But she was just standing there, staring at me. I could feel her eyes burning into my soul. Was she angry? Was I hallucinating? I considered going to find help, but then a cleaner walked past her. He didn't even look at her. He just swept past and skipped on his merry way. He wouldn't just let a child stand there, right? Was she a ghost? If I got up to help, then I would have to take my eyes off the girl. And then what if she ran away? What if some creep snatched her? No, her safety was important. 20 minutes. It was getting ridiculous. This poor little girl had been abandoned or something. I decided that when 25 minutes passed, if nothing had happened, I'd hop up and go ask her if she was okay. I don't know why I didn't do it sooner, but I was hoping her parents would come collect her or something. As long as I kept a lookout for the girl, everything would be okay. 22 minutes passed, and she was still standing there, staring at me from a distance. I needed to take a picture and send it to someone to make sure I wasn't seeing things, like a sleepy hallucination or a psychotic break or something, because this apparently invisible ghost demon child is just standing there casually glaring in my direction. I crap you not, here's what came out on my phone's camera. I sent it to my boyfriend at the time for confirmation. No, I wasn't seeing things, I wasn't dreaming, I needed to go help her. And 25 minutes later, she was still stood there, dead still, staring at me in the freezing cold in the dead of night. Just me and her, here on this dark and creepy platform. I stood up and tentatively walked towards her. I got a bit closer and she stood there, remaining still. Now, as I got closer, it was probably the most oh my god moment I've ever experienced. I saw her face, the shadows hitting it under the dim station lights. It looked half melted, like she had no real eyes. My heart was pumping faster and faster and faster. I couldn't stop now. This poor girl was probably a victim of a horrific accident, and definitely not a demon, just because she stood so still for so long in the cold weather and stared at me. Well, I guess maybe she didn't stare at me, she didn't have eyes. Wait, what if she is actually a ghost? Is this my last moment on this planet? No, don't be stupid, she is just a poor little girl. I was scared, I admit, but I knew that this girl with the melted face needed someone's help. I needed to go ask her if she was okay. Besides, what kind of person would I be if I'd just left her there? As I got closer, it just became more clear. She was deformed, abandoned, a poor little girl. But I couldn't help be scared, but I powered through. I walked up closer to her, opened my mouth to ask her something, trembling, and I couldn't believe what I saw. She was made of Lego. She was a goddamn art installation made of Lego. Just standing there being creepy, staring at people, and being made of Lego. Went to a bar about 20 minutes from my apartment in Brooklyn. Because of construction and because I didn't know the way home, I'd lived there for about a month. It took some time to get home. When I got there, I noticed I had a Facebook message from someone I didn't know. Checked it, and it was some guy saying, "Nice apartment, can I come in?" I looked outside, and there was some guy who had followed me home. I hadn't given my friend my new address yet, and he may have gotten my Facebook from a friend at the bar. I bolted the door and blocked him. The fact that he followed me and just randomly texted me rather than talk to me at the bar was unnerving. Edit, because I keep getting asked, I'm a female. I was alone in the house. An unknown number called me, and I could hear the same TV show I was watching. I kept saying hello, and my voice would echo back. I thought it was just one of those broken calls where you hear your mic feedback, but what happened next creeped me out. Right before I put down the call, I heard a voice saying, "Goodbye, good night." I stared at the phone, confused of what happened. Then I said hello again. The static and the echo disappeared. It was all quiet, then suddenly, "Hi." I put down the phone, turned off the TV, then ran to bed. So I went to a community college for a year before I transferred to a 4-year school. And there was this really awkward looking guy in almost all my classes. I was just taking Gen ED stuff, and I also saw him everywhere around campus. In class, there he is. In the student center, there he is. Waiting to order some food, there he is. I never actually spoke to the guy, but he was everywhere. But it was a small school, so you see a lot of people everywhere on campus, but no one quite as much as him. Then I transferred to a different school that was 2 hours away. I moved into my dorm and get ready to start classes. Then when school started, I went to my first class, and there he was, sitting there in the first row. Never saw him again after that semester though. About 3 years ago, I lived alone in my apartment. My ex had come over late to spend the night with me. About 3 a.m. someone tried to kick my front door in. It was seriously the loudest explosion I've ever heard. We were sure they were in my apartment. My dogs were going crazy. I had no weapon to protect us. Boyfriend grabbed a bat and stood at my bedroom door while I hid in the closet trying to call a neighbor and the police. Finally, neighbors and cops get there. Some dude pissed all over my front door. Never broke in though. About a week later, I was cleaning my apartment and had the glass sliding door leading to my patio open. I was on the first floor, but I had the screen door locked. Stupid, I know. Anyway, I'm cleaning along and my dog starts ferociously growling. I hurry to the living room and some dude is under my patio just having a standoff with my 150-pound bull mastiff. Once he saw me and realized my dog could disembowel him, he ran away. 2 days later, I have 3 long stem roses sitting on my patio. The only access to my patio is either through my apartment or you have to jump the little fence that surrounds it. About a week later, I noticed that the screen door is cut along the edge, making an entrance big enough to fit through. Around the same time, one of my neighbors called me to make sure my doors were locked, because there was some guy pacing back and forth in front of my front door. I think this was all that happened. There was a detective assigned to me during this. She suggested that someone might be stalking me. I wanted to move, but her response was, "If someone is watching you, they'll just follow you." So effing helpless until suddenly it all stopped. I can only imagine that whoever it was either found someone else or something terrible has happened to them. The piss, the kick, the flowers, EBGBs. When I was about 10 years old, we lived on the outskirts of the city. We had 2 driveways. One is on the right side of the house and the other is on the left side, further away from the house that leads to the garage. At around 11 p.m., my stepdad went to pick up my older brother at work. I was at home with my mom and siblings. I was the older sibling. My mom was asleep because she had to get up at 5 a.m. I hear a knock on the door and stupid-ass me answered the door, thinking it was my stepdad and brother that was locked out. I opened the door and there stood a white dude that was in his 50s. His car was parked in the right-hand driveway. He asked me if I knew where Wolfie Street was. He had come from that direction. I said yeah, because we passed it on our way to my house. It was about a mile down the road in a black neighborhood. I pointed in the direction it was and then he asked sternly, "Is anyone else home?" I said, "Yeah, my mom is here." He then asks where my dad was, and luckily they were passing the house, getting ready to pull into the driveway with the garage. I pointed and said, "Right there." He quickly turns around and starts walking back to his car. My stepdad comes inside furious. He asked what the F that was all about, and I told him. He said I could have been kidnapped because the car had 3 other guys and the guy acted really suspicious when they drove off. I'm not sure if I would have been kidnapped, especially with my mom there, but who knows. My wife and I had just bought a new house. After we took possession of the keys, we stopped by to look it over and plan some projects. I noticed the faucet in the kitchen dripping. I took it apart to change the washer, but couldn't get it put back together. I was really frustrated and my wife was impatient, so I just left it with all the parts scattered across the counter. When I came back the next day, the faucet was fully reassembled and wasn't leaking anymore. This one weirded me out a bit. A few years ago, I woke up to 2 text messages from my girlfriend and a friend of mine. Both asked if I was alright. Apparently, they both had a dream that I had been struck by a red truck at an intersection I routinely took. The 2 of them weren't close and I had no reason to suspect that they were playing a prank. It was just really spooky that they both had the same dream, the same night, with the same details. As a kid, I used to help an elderly lady across the street. She lived alone, with yard work. I hadn't seen her in quite a while, so I went over to check. I found her lying dead on our kitchen floor, with her cat crying for food. She had been dead for some time apparently. Never having seen death before, it really creeped me out. My first college roommate was kicked out because coke. They sent another kid to the room with me at the semester that was beyond weird. He would just at night put his cape on, I crap you not, and go out all night long, coming home right before class in the morning. In the morning, he would take his cape off, stand in front of the mirror, and slap his face a few times, then go to class. So weird. I had this girl stalking me last year of college. I brought her home one night and did the typical college guy thing and didn't text her back. She did a whole bunch of creepy things after that. She climbed a tree in our backyard some nights, which had a direct view into my window, and watched me sleep with pictures she sent me. I'm 99% sure she went into my house when my roommates and I were at class, and she went through my stuff, and I don't know if she left a video camera in there or not. She would get my roommates to take her back with them so she could get into my bed when I got home. She told me she would end herself if I didn't agree to go out with her. She got into a party we had at our house, and roofied me. Luckily, the party got busted, and my buddy put me in my bed and locked the door before she could get to me. There's a lot more, and it didn't end until I graduated. She texts me every few weeks wondering where I am. Thank God she doesn't know where I live. I did call the cops a few times and she got arrested once. I didn't want to file a restraining order just because I didn't want my mom to get involved and worry. For stalkers out there, it's not cool. I was extremely scared. When I was about 8 or 9, my sister, friend, and I were walking over into the next neighborhood to fetch another friend. We knock on the door and talk for a few minutes, and then look back over to the space in between the 2 houses, in which we walked past to get here. We saw 2 people, man and woman, walk over and just block that space. They both just stand there and stare at us. The friend tells us we have to go now, but we don't know what to do considering these 2 people are standing there. There's another way to get back, but it takes longer, and meant walking across a busy road. Not an attractive idea for several 8-year-olds. We knock again and ask her mom to walk us back, the long way. She does, and as we hit the road, the 2 people start following us, even though her mom is here. We hit the busy road and walk across, and then her mom leaves us. The 2 people run across the street and walking behind us. We begin to run now. They begin to run and follow us all the way back to the neighborhood. We run into our other friend's backyard and hide. They continue to walk around the neighborhood and look for us. We run around behind the houses until we reach our house. We look out the window and they continue looking. They stand there for about an hour before going back. Not too much, but creepy to us back then. I stopped at a rest stop driving along 95 on the way home from college many years back. While in the bathroom, a middle-aged man made an innocuous comment about the weather to me while we were at the urinal. I said something equally bland in reply. Afterwards, I was sitting in my car right outside trying to fire up some music before taking off, maybe for 5 minutes. I looked over to my right and there was this guy, sitting in his car with the engine idling, just staring at me down like I was prey. I remember having never been stared at like that, but I knew what it meant. I took off and he pursued me in his car. I tried to lose him in the parking lot, but without luck. Just as I was going to get back on the highway to try and lose him, I decided to go inside the rest stop and tell someone. I double parked it right outside, ran in and frantically told a security guard this story. He came outside with me and my stalker saw us and sped off towards the ramp. I'm a dude and I almost got R-worded, possibly worse, at a rest stop. I was 15 years old. I was at the local mall by myself. I noticed an older guy looking at me in a store. I walked out of the store and the guy followed me. For the next hour, wherever I went, he was within sight. At one point, I walked out the door of the mall to the curb. He walked up to me outside and asked me if I needed a ride anywhere. I lied and told him I was waiting for my mom to get off work from Sears. He shrugged and went away. This was back in the 70s. Things were really different back then. Stranger danger wasn't really a thing. I probably told my parents about this and they shrugged it off as most parents back then would. It was a different world. In high school, I was applying for a job in a supermarket. I'd just come from school and was still wearing my uniform. The counter to apply was a little high for me, so I had to stand on my toes. Anyways, after being there for about 5 minutes, a woman taps me on the shoulder and says, "Not sure how to tell you this, but I wouldn't feel right not saying anything. That man just took a photo under your skirt." I looked and there was this dude speed walking to the subway entrance. I couldn't catch up, but even if I did, what would I have done? That was weird. Was at a dive bar with a friend having a beer. A scrawny, deaf-mute guy walked up to me making jerky, spastic movements with his body. He pulls a lotto sheet off our table and writes on it, "Do you know where I can get a gun?" and hands it to me. As I finish reading, he suddenly pulls up his shirt, quickly revealing an empty gun holster, which my first thought is a knife out of fear, and slams his fist on the table. I guess he meant it as a joke, but I thought he was gonna kill me right there and then. And I was gonna die in a pile of Chinese takeout at a crappy diver bar midday during a weekday. That was gonna be my story. The deaf guy grabbed a cigarette from my friend's pack sitting on the table, and he jumped on a bicycle and rode away. It just raised so many more questions, to be honest. Last summer, I moved into my parents' in-law apartment with my boyfriend. Their entire house has an alarm system, including our apartment door. So a couple of months after moving in, we went on a hike together. When we got back to the car, I saw I had a message from my parents, who were in Maine, asking if we had trouble with the alarm. While we were gone, our apartment door's alarm had gone off, but the police didn't catch anyone. A month or so later, while I was at school and my boyfriend was at work, the alarm went off again. I'd gotten a text from my mom asking if I had trouble with the alarm, so I called her to tell her that nobody was home. Apparently, the alarm had gone off about an hour ago, and the alarm company told my mother that the apartment door had been opened, and that somebody picked up the phone, used my name, and gave the wrong alarm code. However, my mom had assumed I forgot the code and told them not to call the police. The door was not damaged at all, and there was no visible evidence that someone had been in our apartment, so I'm not really sure why someone would have entered. My parents have rented the apartment to a lot of different people over the past 30 years though, so it's possible that someone copied the key at some point or something. We ended up changing the locks and haven't had an incident since, but the whole incident made me so paranoid. Sitting in my ex's living room, all doors and windows are closed, no breeze. Picture frame flies off the wall, lands in the middle of the room, slides until it hits the wall. I left immediately. That was only one of several things that happened to me in that house. People are asking, so here's more. Another time, her and I were sitting in her kitchen eating dinner. Above the table was this chandelier thing with like 5 different bulbs. Suddenly, this one bulb of the 5 starts flickering on and off. Think stereotypical creepy flickering light. Faster, then slower, then faster again. Then I notice it's a pattern. 3 short flickers, and then 3 long, and then 3 short. Otherwise known as Morse code for SOS. What the fuck? She regarded it as, the ghost is just doing its thing, it's whatever. I got up and left the house. Another time I spent the night in her bed. The door to her room was open about halfway. I woke up in the middle of the night with cold sweats. As I'm looking at the door, it slowly starts to close. Then all at once it just slams shut. I woke her ass up and made her stay awake with me the rest of the night. There was the time we were in our living room, hear a bang from the kitchen. Bottle of laundry detergent had fallen out of the basket they had above the cabinets. The basket was the kind that hung, and when we looked in, like 2 seconds after it happened, it wasn't moving at all. And that stuff was sensitive as hell. Besides that, there was just a general feeling of anxiety and being watched all the time, but like really subtle. It was a long time before I noticed that one. She swears that she saw the ghost once, dressed up in a Civil War Confederate's uniform. She said it looked like her dad, who had passed away about a month before I met her. Creepiest thing ever. When I moved into my first apartment at age 18, which was in a large subdivided house. I didn't have a bed yet and slept on a pile of my clothes. Somehow it came up in a casual conversation with my new neighbor, a man in his 60s, and he said he had an extra bed in storage in the shed out back I could borrow. I thanked him and took him up on his offer, and he helped me move the frame and mattress into my apartment and set it up. I went to use the bathroom, and when I came back out, he had put a corn tape into my VHS player and expected me to watch it with him. I used to jog by Nürnberger Tower in Waltham, MA. It's this side street that, for whatever reason, has an old-timey tower. Just there. It always struck me as odd. Sort of creepy in and of itself. Anyway, one day I'm huffing along, and I make the turn onto Nürnberger. Cars come by occasionally, but less so than on other Waltham streets. Out of the corner of my eye, I see this car approaching but slowing way down. Sweet. Naturally, I ignore it. This older guy is waving out the window, trying to get my attention. He got a scraggly beard and crazy eyes. I pop my earbuds out and look his way. Do you want to do it? My face sort of flushed. As a 27-year-old dude with a wife, I'd not ever been propositioned by a dude before. Doc, I didn't answer. I'm out of breath as it is. If this dude comes after me, I'm gonna have a situation. Do you want to do it? Just wanting the dude to go away, I gave him the finger and said F off. Thankfully he did. Giving someone the finger in a sincere way struck me as incredibly odd even at the time. Now, I'm a terrible jogger. In fact, I hate jogging. I suck at it. I effing cranked the remainder of my run though. Best time I'd ever made. When I got to the end of the road, there's this little duck pond. I'd never noticed before, but there were at least 4 to 5 older guys, all sitting in their cars, just sitting in their car. I think my jogging route was a gay cruising hotspot. Thank you so much for watching. If you have stories of your own, please feel free to write them in the comments, so I can make a video on them in the future. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.